Yo, welcome to this episode of the True Conspiracy Podcast, Unseen Powers in the Music Industry, with your host, Vicious Technique. So today we're going to question the music industry's connection to war profiteering and fossil fuel companies through a hedge fund that is one of the largest investors in private prisons. So we're going to explain this connection, who's behind this conspiracy, the results, potential future, as well as the results from something similar that's happened in the past. We're going to use multiple verifiable sources that you can check in hopes for resolutions to create a more fair and just situation, eliminate conflicts of interest, and bring the truth. That's what we're about here, the truth. So we have that information to understand and deal with some of these problems that might seem like by chance, but in all actuality, it's a true conspiracy involving some of the most powerful and influential companies controlled by one of the largest hedge funds in the world. So let's get into it. First off, we talked about before about how there's a conflict of interest with Spotify and the major labels. So I'm here to bring to your attention that there's also a conflict of interest between this large hedge fund and Spotify. This large hedge fund that is connected to war profiteering, defense contractors, fossil fuel companies that pollute the world, and is one of the largest investors in private prisons. That hedge fund is named BlackRock, okay? BlackRock is a top 10 shareholder of Spotify with over $400 million invested. So we'll explain about the recent investments of BlackRock and Catalog, furthering their influence in the music industry. So if they're owning Spotify, if they're a major shareholder in Spotify, they have say over what goes on. So it shows that they're able to rig the system. They're able to control what we hear through their influence at Spotify. We talked in depth before, so just give a little summary. The majority of traffic on Spotify goes through playlists, and the majority of playlists that are allowed on Spotify today are editorial playlists, algorithmic playlists that are completely controlled by Spotify. So Spotify has a conflict of interest now to make sure that BlackRock's catalog is number one. That could cause problems for independent artists. That eliminates the meritocracy because BlackRock is an investor in Spotify and is an investor in the music catalogs that they're pushing. In the songs, they own the songs that are being now pushed on the playlist. So that's a completely rigged system, and it eliminates any meritocracy. And what it also allows is for now a complete narrative and an immense amount of influence can take place. So now BlackRock and their connected companies can tell Spotify, we're pushing these artists that have this particular narrative, and it could be a completely violent and crime-ridden narrative and vibe that's pushed by these particular songs. Why? Because it's connected to the prisons. They're one of the biggest investors in prisons. So why wouldn't they want to push this content that's going to promote crime if it's connected to their other investments? And this hedge fund, BlackRock, owns so many different businesses and companies, and a lot of them have to do with genocide. Or I shouldn't say a lot of them, but some of them have to do with genocide with defense contractors. They're investing in pharmaceutical companies. So are we going to hear rappers talking about specific pills now that are owned by these pharmaceutical companies that are owned by BlackRock, who we just broke down, that owns a big chunk of Spotify and owns catalog, owns music in the industry? So what's going on here? It's clear that there's a connection. It's clear that they basically rigged this system where they can control who hears it, they can control the audience, and they own the music. Therefore, they control and they dictate the narrative, the message, what's getting pushed, and what the kids are hearing, what the youth, the younger generations are hearing, because they're listening to hip hop. And right here, based on musicbusinessworldwide.com from February of 2022. So it says that Influence Media Partners has announced a new alliance and partnership with funds and accounts managed by BlackRock Alternative Investors. BlackRock and Warner Music Group to create a music rights platform that will invest in and manage premier compositions from some of music's most influential creators, influencing the youth. All right, to continue on with the quote. This includes a strategic focus on cultivating the modern, evergreen, contemporary compositions that have strong potential for a multi-decade impact on culture, as well as investing in female artists and songwriters with the emphasis on diversity, end quote. So they're promoting is, in a sense, in my opinion, I see this as propaganda, but we're all about facts here. So let's just say their narrative here in this particular article is talking about diversity. But they've also talked about investing in modern, evergreen, contemporary compositions. That's hip hop. What do we see on the forefront of hip hop right now? Drill, which is very violent, very violent. What is BlackRock also invest in? Weapons. They're also a weapon contractor, okay? And they have done business that has resulted in genocide in Yemen, in Gaza, okay? So this has to be brought to attention. This conflict of interest has to be brought to the forefront, and there needs to be discussions about it, and we'll get into some solutions later. But it is a fact that they basically rigged the system, so that's clear. And they're investing in weapons manufacturers, as well as the music. And what did I just make the connection to with one of the most popular music going on right now? Drill. All right. So we have from codepink.org, we have the source says that BlackRock has invested $4.6 billion in Lockheed Martin. A study done by the Defense for Children International into the 2014 assault in Gaza determined that at least 225 of the 550 children who died in the 50-day assault died from Israeli warplane attacks, including by Lockheed Martin F-16 fighter jets. So the same company investing in diversity, quote unquote, with Warner Music Group is also invested in Lockheed Martin, who's perpetuating genocides within the world. So what diversity? I don't understand how that diversity in their catalogs is gonna balance out the genocides? No, I don't think that a financial entity that is perpetuating genocide, pollution, death, weapons should then also be able to own media that then influences the masses. If they deal in death, they should deal in death. They shouldn't also deal in influence. It's a clear conflict of interest. And we saw what happened in 2008, that there was no ethics, that they took these financial instruments, these securities, and then created options on it. So now we see that there's music royalty asset-backed securities, okay? So are these entities, other hedge funds too? I did all this research on BlackRock, and I'm making this connection with BlackRock, but there's additional hedge funds and big financial players getting into music catalogs now. So are there going to be options on these asset-backed securities from the music catalog royalties? Is that going to then crash the music industry and then eliminate an option for the impoverished to then rise out, one of the few? Is that a part of the plan? Because we know that these hedge funds, a lot of them are invested, or at least this one in particular, we know for a fact is invested in jails, war, and pollution-producing fuels. So what is the end result going to be? Is the end result going to be a spin, a promotion, a kind of trying to cleansing, trying to use the cachet from these newer music acts, using the pop culture appeal to then make fossil fuel okay, to make it seem like they're not doing pollution, or to maybe shift the focus? That's a question I'm asking. I'm asking how are they gonna benefit? How are they gonna benefit from this immense influence? Because they have so many different companies that they can now spin with the control of music, because of the influential factor. These kids are listening to hip hop. These kids are growing up on hip hop. They're being taught by hip hop and the most popular music. So if that is telling them that fossil fuels is okay, if that's telling them kill, buy this gun, this specific gun, buy this specific pill, and it just so happens the same hedge fund owns that, that's a huge problem. It's eroding our society. It's brainwashing the kids. It's to do drugs, to kill each other, and to have a poor understanding on climate change, and to have a warped understanding on pollution. So what I'm saying, what I'm trying to say here is, my main point I'm trying to really get across here is that if a company like BlackRock is heavily invested in companies that cause great harm to the public, like weapon contractors and fossil fuels and the prison industrial complex, they should not be allowed to then invest in media outlets and music industry, in the music industry, that then has this huge influence over the youth. They should not be able to do both. It's a conflict of interest, and we run the risk of eroding our society and really the world because of the climate change crisis. So we have this Guardian article from January 2021, and it says, BlackRock, quote, BlackRock has faced significant pressure from environmental activists to improve its record on climate action, given its role as the biggest controller of shares and bonds in the world, including vast holdings of fossil fuel companies, end quote. So the leaders at BlackRock were saying, oh, we're probably going to get rid of our fossil fuel shares, and we're going to focus more on climate-friendly investments. But it was all talk, because CBS News later came out and reported, quote, BlackRock was vocal about the world's needs to transition to a carbon-free economy, and the world's largest money manager has pushed its portfolio companies to set targets for reaching a new zero emissions world. But the investor manager, which holds $10 trillion in client funds, has also been touting its fossil fuel credentials in Texas, where it faces heat from politicians and the state's powerful oil and gas industries. All right. So we have a quote from BlackRock here now within the CBS News article. Quote, this is from BlackRock. Quote, we will continue to invest and support fossil fuel companies, including Texas fossil fuel companies, BlackRock wrote in a January letter. The memo addressed, quote, to whom it may concern, end quote, was sent to Texas officials and local trade groups, a BlackRock spokesperson said. So they're coming and they're showing us that they're not truthful. They're coming and saying, oh yeah, we're gonna do what's right for the climate, and then when the oil prices go up and they can profit off it, they're right back into these pollution-riddled fuels. So we've established their war profiteering. We've established their investment in pollution-riddled fuels, okay? But the most egregious in my view is their connection to the prison industrial complex. And the reason I say that is because of what we saw with gangster rap. And there was a 1991 letter, anonymous letter that was written from the music industry rep, that basically said that there was a secret meeting. And this is conjecture. This is alleged, what I'm about to say here about this letter and the secret meeting. But I say that to then set the stage for what is real and what is true and what is actually happening. And it is a true conspiracy between the largest owner of private prisons, the largest investor, one of the largest investors in private prisons, and that same investor, BlackRock, is also investing in the music industry heavily, as well as Spotify, who we know controls the audience, the majority of the audience of music listeners today in 2022. So just to be clear, to set the disclaimer, this letter that I'm talking about is not proven fact, although everything after and everything before is, okay? And I've established with sources. So this letter explained a conspiracy in detail of basically the prison industrial complex coming to the major label executives and saying, your related companies, your affiliated companies are invested in private prisons. It would behoove you to push content that is more crime-ridden and more focused on violence and activities that will put people in jail. And some people were outraged, and some people apparently went along with it, allegedly. All right? So I'm basing a lot of this off of the NPR podcast This NPR podcast is titled Louder Than a Riot from October 2020. And this particular podcast episode I'm referencing is The Conspiracy Against Hip Hop. It's a great podcast. I suggest you check it out. So within this podcast, they talk to Too Short, and he, from his own experience, explains that executives from his label were telling him to be raunchier, to be edgier, to be like these more violent rappers that were pushing more violent content from Death Row Records, and they were selling the most at that time. So this letter that comes out that they explain in this podcast, this anonymous letter was released in 1991. And although it is alleged, it seems very plausible because of the results. There was a shift in the focus of hip hop around this time to focus of more gangster rap, more on criminal activity, and the more positive hip hop was pushed to the back burner. Okay, this is in 91. This anonymous letter comes out. Subsequently, we have the 94 crime bill, where the politicians are referring to African Americans and people within the black communities as quote unquote super predators. Okay, and this crime bill decimated black communities all over the U.S. So we see the results. Okay, so although this is alleged, we see the results of the black communities being decimated. All right, and then now today we know for a fact that BlackRock owns music catalogs. They own share in Spotify, the music industry. And they also are one of the largest investors in private prisons. We know for a fact now today. That's not alleged, all right? So that is the direct connection. That is the direct connection that was alleged in this anonymous article, okay? So now from hiphopforchange.org, that was NPR, for hiphopforchange.org, further emphasizes this point. Quote, right now, 3 companies, Warner Records, Universal Music Group, and Sony Music Group, control around 90% of the depiction of hip-hop. At the same time, 2 companies, Core Civic, formerly CCA Corrections Corporation of America, and GEO Group, own almost all the private prison beds in the USA. What connects these 2 industries together? Vanguard and BlackRock, which are the largest shareholders in both media and prison, end quote. All right? That's the proven connection right there. All right? We've established it. We've proven it. So this anonymous letter, the results are plausible, and then now it is apparently coming entirely true. Entirely true in today if you look at it from what we've broken down. All right? And this is unacceptable, and it cannot be repeated. The destruction of U.S. communities cannot be repeated. This conflict of interest cannot continue. It's ridiculous. It's our own U.S. citizens are being broken down. It's basically a class attack. The wealthiest within the U.S. are able to heavily invest and literally conspire to keep everybody else out, locked out. And it's literally leading to death, destruction, broken families. And the same company that's causing this is also doing genocide with their defense contractors. So it's not like it's some great grand company that's doing all this good in the world. No, they're literally doing genocide, okay? They're literally investing in fossil fuels, which is killing people through the harmful chemicals and the pollution and the remnants of it. And they're literally one of the largest investors in private prisons, okay? This is not a good institution. This is not an institution that should be allowed to release music that raises the children. Hip hop is raising the next generations, okay? The money behind, the entities behind hip hop cannot also have a vested interest in locking up the children. It's a vicious cycle, and it happened before, and it can't happen again. And it needs to be brought to the forefront, and it needs to be talked about, because these private jails, okay, cannot be continued to be filled off the influence of drill and hip hop. They can't manipulate the music industry to push the most violent and keep back the positive and the motivational. Going back to the NPR podcast, Too Short said it. He goes, all right, I'll make the raunchy, the more negative, quote unquote, negative album that they wanted, the label wanted. The executive literally said, I want something more raunchy, edgier, something more like Death Row. That's what the executive told Too Short. He goes, okay, I'll do that. But I also want to make the next one, I want to do a positive album. I want it, quote unquote, positive. That's what Too Short said. I want it to be, he said, quote unquote, I have motivational content on there. That's what he said he wanted to put out. That album never came out. So what do we have? What is the result? The result is being pushed to the forefront. These topics of killing, these topics of misogynistic topics in a lot of sense. And there's a place and a time for every type of content. I'm not saying that anything should be taken off platforms. I'm not saying any type of artist should be reprimanded. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the conflict of interest between the BlackRock, who owns private prisons and also owns Spotify and music industry entities, should be eliminated. The very least regulated. All conflicts of interest need to be eliminated, okay? And there needs to be a meritocracy. There can't be an unfair push of the violent and the content that the violent content and the content that promotes criminal activity. That can't be rigged and completely inundate the audience, while the positive and motivational content is literally being shadow banned and not allowed to be played. And those artists that are more quote unquote positive aren't allowed to rise because that doesn't make these hedge funds money. Okay? And again, if these hedge funds are owning the major label catalogs and owning parts of the major labels, they wouldn't want independent artists to come up. It's a conflict of interest. But more so than the independent, which we talked about before, is the connection to the private prisons and the weapon contractors, weapon manufacturing. It's unacceptable. It can't be allowed. It cannot be allowed, this connection between the music industry and these toxic investments, okay? We need solutions. There needs to be regulation of the biggest hedge funds to mitigate these conflicts of interest that have historically harmed the public, all right? So it's clear they're doing genocide. It's clear they're owning private prisons. They can't also own the art that's influencing the youth. They can't own the media that's influencing the public. It's a conflict of interest, and it's eroding our society. It's corruption. It's eliminating the meritocracy. It's eliminating really what is the best, and really in this case, a positive message, a progressive message, a motivational, uplifting message, something that could raise the vibration of the public, is literally being shadow banned and put in the back burner for something that's more violent. Why? Because the entities that own the music and own the music industry, entities like Spotify and the related businesses, they also own private prisons. They also own these toxic corporations that they're benefiting from pushing this toxic influence, pushing the more violent and criminal-riddled content of the music industry. They're literally, they've created a vicious cycle to profit from. And it needs to be regulated, and the conflicts of interest need to be eliminated, all right? There needs to be an ethics tax. So if a company is doing genocide, they can't receive government contracts. They can't receive any tax benefits. Actually, they should be taxed more if they're doing genocide, okay? Well, it shouldn't be allowed. There should be criminal, there should be criminal repercussions. There should be legal repercussions for doing genocide. Genocide is not legal, but we know that there's genocides happening in 2022, and we know that there's defense contractors and weapons manufacturers that are perpetuating the machinery and the equipment to do the genocides. So that's literally happening right now, and there's no legal conversations happening about is this legal? No, it's just happening. So if it's just going to happen for the sake of capitalism, there needs to be an ethics tax, all right, as well as a billionaire tax. The wealthiest pay the least in taxes a lot of times. This tax money can then be used to have boards and have entities that can assist in the regulation of these conflicts of interest, assist in eliminating corruption from other sectors of our society, because this is just not a problem within the music industry. Corruption erodes meritocracy in all sectors of society. When meritocracy is eliminated from society, then eventually it is set up to fail, because the people that are actually fit to do the job and will do the job the best, which then results in productivity and results in a productive society, they're thrown to the back, and they're thrown to the ground. They're disheveled. They're put off, and then in some instances killed. And then what happens? There's no one there to really do the work, and the production goes down, and then eventually the society crumbles. And in this particular episode, what we're talking about are artists, that the artists aren't able to come up, that there's no meritocracy in the music industry. What the people really want to hear, and in some cases what is best for the people, isn't allowed to flourish. So then what does that do? That shifts society into a darker, more a darker society that's basically completely focused on serving the richest, just going about it, and it's completely at the will of the wealthiest individuals, because they own all the entities that are providing the content. They own the content that the people are ingesting, public's ingesting, and they own the entities that are distributing the content. They control the narratives. They control the mentality of the masses at that point. Okay? And if they're able to do that in media and arts, then they decide how the society is shaped. Because artists and entrepreneurs historically have been able to establish the innovative aspects of society, have been basically able to direct society. And if now these large financial companies are completely controlling all of that innovation and eliminating the ability for artists to come up in a meritocracy, then society is basically doomed. And in this case, it's the U.S. society. So it's proven. It's I didn't just make this up, that corruption erodes society. No. So this is deep corruption. This is deep conflict of interest, and it needs to be addressed. Okay. And if these taxes are able to go forth, this ethics tax, the billionaire tax, the regulation of these hedge funds, more taxes on these hedge funds, then there's going to be funds for universal health care, funds for artists and independent development, funds for eliminating child hunger, eliminating homelessness, eliminating drastic inequality, the main eliminating water scarcity and the water issues and the poor air quality, the issues that really matter to the people can be addressed with these additional tax of the wealthiest of society. And the ones that are really perpetuating genocide and immoral behavior, they need to be taxed more, because they understand that language. Taking away the money, you're basically disincentivizing that activity, okay? But we see a lot of times the government is actually giving grants and giving large sums of money to the entities that are perpetuating genocide and perpetuating the pollution and the harm to the climate. So we need to put forth these solutions. We need to bring light to injustice, and we need to stay focused. We do stay focused on our daily activity, take care of ourselves, take time to ourselves, make sure we rest enough, and really love ourselves. And that concludes today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to discuss today's topic as well as the other episode topics, you can go ahead and sign up for our Patreon. Subscribe on YouTube if you don't want to sign up for the Patreon. Social media, Teknique. Music is on all streaming platforms. And remember, the world is ours. It's up to us to make it a better place. Peace.